This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And this is Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast.
Oh, yeah, baby, yeah.
Ooh, it's true. You are. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to have a blast. This is going to be a great episode.
Oh, yeah, we're going to Spooky Town tonight.
Spooky Town, USA? No, Spooky Town, UK.
That's right. We're going to the UK this time.
So get your tea ready.
Yep.
Get an umbrella. Kiss your pounds.
Kiss your Cocker Spaniel.
Kiss your corgi and get ready. But before we start with that, feel free to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. If you have any episode suggestions for us, please feel free to get in touch with us via any of those social media platforms, as well as our email address, which is creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com. If you're looking for more Creep Street content, bonus episodes, little movie commentary, and some very fun spooky short stories, as well as many other things, feel free to check out patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for more. And speaking of Patreon, we could not do this podcast without our patrons, and they deserve some credit.
That's right.
So Dylan, will you please list off the names of our top tier Patreon donors?
Oh, you couldn't stop me if you tried. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face via a Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the British Bonebreaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Leviathan Levi Mace, and the Loathsome Johnny Love.
Ooh, man, you just added about 15 solid years to my life.
That's right.
By listing off those scrumptious, lovely names.
Oh, yeah.
If you'd like to be like those absolute heroes and are interested in some bonus Creep Street content, once again, check out patreon.com.
That's right.
/CreepStreetPodcast.
Absolutely.
Last week, didn't we just have a damn blast?
We did.
No pun intended, with dang Lisa Nowak.
That was a blast. People liked this episode a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that was a weird one. And it was different for us because it was a true crime episode, but there was no murder.
Right.
You know, nothing. She was not successful, or we don't even know what she was really trying to do.
Exactly. We don't even know. But still so bizarre, it deserved a place on Creep Street.
But since last week, we did a little different thing. We wanted to just get right into some classic Creep Street, just like peak Creep Street content. Yeah. We're talking paranormal, spooky, scary, haunting, all of the above. Dylan, blast off.
Today's episode is The Black Monk Haunting. And really quick, let me give you my sources.
Please.
Couple of books here. The first book is called Poltergeist, a classic study in destructive hauntings by Colin Wilson. And then the book Trail of Terror by Richard Estep.
Trail of Terror. That's spooky. I'm excited.
Spooky stuff. It's very spooky stuff. Now, this one, as we said, takes place in the UK. You're going to see so many similarities to Bridgeport Poltergeist.
Oh.
Bridgeport, I think, is overall kind of a very depressing story.
I know. It's kind of a bummer.
This
all around.
one is also super scary, but has it has a more optimistic vibe to it.
Okay.
I guess but still very scary, but obviously throughout talk about how they compare and whatnot. But why don't I just get started?
Yeah.
So this story takes place in 1966 in the English town of Pontefract. Now, before we dive into the family, let's get caught up on the history of Pontefract and the surrounding area.
I think that's a good idea, so thank you for that.
So Pontefract is an ancient town that dates back to when the Romans were trying to occupy the British Isles.
Right.
And apparently the name Pontefract actually means broken bridge in Latin. And even though Pontefract is not far from other towns like Leeds and Doncaster, the source says that the town has kind of maintained that sort of 19th century style. Obviously, it's
cool.
modernized, like
right.
but it kind of has that look, that charm of
kind of has that vibe to it.
Exactly. So it sounds like a lovely little place.
It does.
The source describes Pontefract as sort of oozing with charm, and of course, also it has an ancient history.
Yeah.
But as we all know, not all of that history is good. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just when you have an ancient history.
It's just the law of averages.
Just
baby.
the law of averages. No matter where you go, if you're talking ancient history, bad shit's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Big time. But, I'm sure a lot of great things. A lot of beautiful weddings, birthday parties, baptisms. But sometimes you gotta have the nastiness. You gotta have the murder and the treachery.
Exactly. Well, apparently there's a hilltop in the town that once served as a gallows long ago. And well, as the centuries have passed, near where the gallows once stood stands a house.
Uh-oh.
And the address? 30 East Drive. On top of being near the site of the old gallows, the home is apparently built over where once stood a bridge over a stream. As we know, water is believed to hold and enhance supernatural activity.
So this is all adding up.
So
okay.
we have a rife, the ingredients are there.
Yeah,
you got a gallows, you got water. I mean, you got the you got all the fixings.
Mm-hmm. Now you got the ingredients, and I think it's about to be baked into a cake, a big spooky cake.
That's right. So our story picks up in August of 1966. And living at 30 East Drive was the Pritchard family. Living in the house together was Jean and Joe Pritchard, the parents, their 15-year-old son Philip, and their 12-year-old daughter Diane. While the family was taking a vacation down to Devon in the southwest of England, Philip was at the age of 15 and decided, hanging out with his parents wasn't as cool as it used to be, so he was just going to stay home that weekend.
Yeah, well, he's a teen. I mean, he's got stuff to do.
And his grandmother, Sarah Scholes, she was Joe's mother. Mm-hmm. She stayed that weekend too. She often would come stay the weekends, and so she stayed there with Philip.
Right. Probably making sure he's not getting into too much bad boy teenage tomfoolery.
Exactly. Well, it was a sunny Thursday afternoon, and parents had left with Diane, and so it's just Philip and Grandma, and Philip grabbed himself a book, went out to the garden, and read his book out there. Sarah was inside, sitting on a settee they had there in their lounge, which I think is like a living room. She was knitting a cardigan. Sarah noticed that the room she was in felt quite chilly, which was weird because it was August. And if it was that chilly in here, she wondered how Philip was able to stand reading outdoors.
Right.
So it's about 11:30 a.m. and suddenly what seemed like a gust of wind just rattled the windows and slammed one of the doors shut. Philip was inside now, and he asked his grandma to look outside and see if the wind was picking up, but she looked outside, calm, beautiful sunny day.
Interesting.
No wind whatsoever. So weird, right? And
Yeah.
they're feeling the chills.
Yeah, this is odd.
Well, Philip went to the kitchen to make himself a cup of coffee and a cup of tea for his grandma. And about 10 minutes later, Philip entered the lounge where his grandma was knitting, carrying the coffee and the tea. But right as Philip walks in, he stops dead in his tracks. Sarah was so caught up in her knitting that she hadn't noticed that all around her in the room was floating this sort of white-gray, chalky dust-like substance floating in the air. When Grandma looked up at Philip, she noticed the cloudiness and even asked him what he'd been up to in a sort of accusing manner. I don't know if maybe she thought he was smoking or something like that.
Smoking or doing a lot, and I mean a lot of cocaine.
A lot of cocaine. Damn, if I was Grandma, I'd say, put me a line up, Phil.
Oh, come on.
Phil. Put Grandma a line up here right on this settee. Phil said he'd been in the kitchen the whole time. And so they both looked up to the ceiling because they wondered if maybe it was the whitewash disintegrating.
Right, yeah.
But
Yeah, that's what I would think too. I'd think it's like something like the paint or, some
Right.
sort of issue with the house.
But here's the thing. They had recently wallpapered the ceiling.
Oh, I like that. First of all, love a wallpapered ceiling. Truly, I do mean that. But yeah, so that kind of takes away that option. Okay.
Well, that's when they noticed the cloudiness was only on the bottom half of the room. The top half was perfectly clear. So Grandma, when she stood up, her head poked out of it like a plane popping out of the clouds.
That's so weird.
Neither of them were necessarily alarmed, but just kind of baffled at what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I don't know what I would think.
Right, it didn't smell like smoke, so they didn't think anything was on fire. That was what was, that's where I would be afraid if you see those colors and think there's a fucking fire.
That's so weird that she was able to like stand above it, like you said, like above clouds kind of. Oh, that's bizarre.
So Sarah went next door to where one of her other daughters lived, Marie Kelly. She lived there with her husband, Vic. Marie, the second she saw her mother, was shocked because Sarah looked almost like a snowman. She was covered in this crap.
That's
it was actually
so
like
weird.
It was like someone dumped,
It was like actually collecting and everything.
Right. It was like someone dumped baking powder or someone. You know what I mean?
Weird.
She was covered in this dust. So Marie follows her back to the house, and strange powder was still falling as if from nowhere. The furniture was covered in a layer of dust. Even Sarah's tea that sat on the table now had like a film on top of it from this dust stuff.
Gross. I'd recommend that you do not drink that, but
Yeah.
I hope they didn't.
Marie decided that whatever the heck it was, they needed to clean it up, so she headed to the kitchen to get some cleaning supplies. And as she entered the kitchen, she nearly slipped on her ass. There was a large pool of water on the floor. Marie asked them if there had been an accident of some kind, like maybe a pipe burst, and there was nothing. So Marie, she took a cloth, mopped up the puddle, and as she's wringing out the cloth in the sink, she looks over to see another puddle forming on the linoleum floor.
That is very, very weird.
Once again, she mops it up and see that it reappears as fast as she mops it up. So she thought the water must be coming up from the floor. So they rolled up the linoleum to have a look, but the floor underneath was bone dry.
That's so weird. Like, how could that? Where did it come from?
You were right. Well, and here's the interesting thing about these puddles. They apparently were all in a very neat outline. It wasn't like water had been poured out of a jug and splashed around. One theory that was made famous by a paranormal investigator named Guy Playfair, he theorized that maybe puddles, because this isn't the only case of poltergeist activity.
Yeah, I've heard of that before.
His guess is maybe these puddles are some sort of condensation that come off of the poltergeist energy, almost like when you're like an engine or something. Obviously,
Okay, I mean,
right.
That's interesting.
And obviously, who knows, but it's an interesting theory.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could happen. I mean, if there is some kind of energy in the room and there's some moisture content in the air. So I guess it could make condensation like that. I mean, it's interesting. It's an interesting thought, at least.
So think about it. You got a snowstorm of weird dust in one room and puddles in the other. Not long after, the source says that whenever they would run the sink or flush the toilet, a sort of green foam would rush out.
No, that is where I would draw the line. That is so heinous.
Heinous.
Absolutely need to get the plumber on the line. Stat, if it was me.
They had another next door neighbor that was also family.
Oh.
Enid Pritchard, who was married to Joe Pritchard's brother. So a lot of family kind of live in the area there.
That's cute.
Enid headed over to have a look for herself, and of course, she couldn't find an explanation either. Marie, she needed to make lunch at home across the street, so she left, but told them she'd put in a call to the town water board. So she did, and they sent someone out right after lunch. By the time the young man from the water board got there, though, the dust had stopped falling in the lounge, and they had cleaned it up the best they could.
Right.
But the puddles in the kitchen were still at it. And of course, the guy checked under the linoleum. He checked all the pipes, couldn't find anything. He was stumped. And he left saying he would report the situation to his superiors. So, of course, they've checked the pipes, everything.
Right.
Nothing wrong with the house that's causing that in terms of physical,
Right.
So after about an hour later, the puddles stopped as well. Marie and Enid went back to their homes, and Sarah returned to her knitting. Sarah was later watching TV that night at around 7 p.m. when Philip entered the room saying, "Grandma, it's happening again." Philip led his grandma to the kitchen. The counter next to the sink was covered with sugar and tea leaves.
Oh.
Together, they watched in astonishment as the tea dispenser, which was over the sink, they watched as the button on the tea dispenser pressed in and out. And they just stood there in silent terror, and they watched as all of the tea drained from this tea dispenser. And even after this dispenser had emptied, the button just kept pushing.
So this fucker hates tea.
I guess so.
Okay, so this guy is not British.
Sarah finally was able to get enough grip to speak, and she just shouted, "Stop it!" And Philip first thought the shout was directed at him, and he's like, "It's not me. I'm not doing it." Of course, she shouted at whatever was doing it.
Right. She was like, "No, I know you are not telepathically doing this.
Exactly.
I'm yelling at the universe."
Well, just then there was the sound of a crash in the hallway. Both of them looked at each other and went pale. Obviously, right now, they haven't even considered paranormal shit. They're afraid an intruder is in the house. They're both terrified. Philip and his grandma slowly walk up to the door that leads to the hallway, and they open it, expecting to see, an intruder there. Of course, the hallway is empty. They just stood there, confused, when suddenly the hallway light flipped on. Sarah nearly jumped out of her skin. Slowly, they walked together down the hallway to the foot of the stairs. Immediately, they found what had made the noise. There was a plant, which normally stood at the bottom of the stairs, but the plant itself was now laying halfway up the stairs, and the actual pot it was in was at the top of the stairs on the landing.
That's so bizarre. The plant is out of the pot.
Right, and the pot went all the way to the top.
And it usually was at the bottom, so it's not like it would have, it fell from the top and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Oh, that's so freaky. Oh,
it went up.
God.
Yeah, shit don't fall upstairs.
No,
you know what I mean?
Usually. I mean, unless you are upside down. But,
Right.
I mean, that is very spooky, scary. And at that point, kind of similar to we mentioned with Annabelle, where it's like, you're either thinking, okay, something paranormal is happening.
Right.
And that's scary. Or someone is intruding in the house.
Right.
And is trying to, give you some kind of a message or taunt you.
Right.
So either way, it's very frightening.
Yeah, very frightening. Well, just then,
Uh-oh.
there came another sound from the kitchen.
Talk
once
about it.
again. So they turn around, slowly walk back to the kitchen. I'm sure they're probably arm in arm. And then they saw what was making the noise in the kitchen. The mockery cupboard in the kitchen was shaking and rattling as if someone had been locked inside and was trying to get out. So slowly, Philip approached it, and taking a deep breath, he flung open the cupboard door. The moment he did, the rattling stopped, and of course, the cupboard was empty. And then there came another sound. From somewhere in the house, they couldn't quite tell. This noise was particularly loud and startling like the others had been. In fact, Sarah heard this noise a few hours earlier. I guess this house it's a semi-detached house.
Okay.
And so it's split into a couple residences, so she just thought that it was the Mountain family next door. May Mountain was the wife. Her husband, I guess, was a carpenter. Maybe he was doing some carpentry at home,
Right.
So Sarah decided it was best to go over to her daughter Marie's once again, who lived across the street. And of course, Philip went with her as well, because he wasn't staying there alone.
Oh, yeah. Hell no.
They go get Marie, and Marie comes back to the house with him. And right away, she could see that it wasn't just a joke or them imagining something. Because when they got to the kitchen, the cupboard was once again shaking and rattling, the dishes and things inside of it. Now, if the cupboard had been up against the dividing wall between the two residences, you might have assumed, well, maybe it's someone next door doing something.
Right, and just, maybe they're nailing a picture to a wall, maybe they're having vigorous sex.
Exactly.
And maybe they're not doing anything. But we don't know.
The cupboard was up against an outside wall, so they wrote that idea off.
Unless if the squirrels were hanging a picture, get it?
Yeah.
Or fucking.
Just to make sure, Grandma stopped over at the mountains next door and asked May if, they were doing anything in the house, and May Mountain looked at her confused, saying, "We thought it was you guys making all that noise."
Uh-oh.
Sarah returns back home, and by then the noise had stopped, and Marie had made a cup of tea. And the three of them, Sarah, Philip, and Marie, just sat and chatted until about 9:30. Marie decided it was time to return home, but told them if anything crazy happened, just to come right over. So Philip and Sarah, they get around for bed, and both headed upstairs to their bedrooms. Sarah went into Philip's room to give him a kiss goodnight, and as she knelt down to give him a kiss, Sarah noticed that Philip's eyes were wide open, staring at something over her shoulder. She turned to see that the wardrobe in his room was shaking and rocking back and forth. Not wasting any time, Sarah told Philip to get dressed. And within 30 minutes, the two of them were warm and cozy in the spare beds over at Marie and Vic's house.
Good.
Well, Sarah and Philip more than happy to just get out of there and be in a warm bed. But Marie and her husband Vic were very intrigued by what was going on, and so intrigued that neither one of them were going to get any sleep. Vic hadn't gone over to look for himself yet because he just assumed there was, a natural explanation.
Right.
But when they couldn't find one, he figured it was best to reach out to some outside help. So Vic called the police station, and he relayed to them the story of what had happened that day to Philip and his grandma. In about 10 minutes, an inspector named Taylor and 2 other officers pulled up. There was no strange activity going on when they arrived, but nevertheless, they did a thorough look through of the house and yet couldn't find any evidence of an intruder. So after some time, they returned to the station and Vic returned home across the street. So Marie and Vic were left with no answers, but still, they were very curious. They remembered that a neighbor who lived down the street from them, whose name is Mr. O'Donnell, he had an interest in the supernatural.
Ooh.
Well, now it was going on midnight, but they just couldn't sleep, so they decided to walk down the street, and they saw that O'Donnell's lights were still on in his house.
Oh my God, I love this.
So they went and knocked on the door, and he answered. They explained everything to him, and he grabbed his coat right away. So being a ghost hunter, O'Donnell knew something was up as soon as they entered 30 East Drive. You see, when they walked in the door, they were met by a blast of cold air.
Uh-oh.
It was like walking into refrigerators, the source said. Other than that, the house, though, was mostly quiet. They sat together in the lounge discussing what had gone on, and O'Donnell explained the difference between ghosts and poltergeists. If this was a poltergeist, they figured it would probably revolve around the 15-year-old Philip, which Philip was now asleep across the street. Good point.
Right, that's true.
So at about 1:45 a.m., they decided to call it a night. O'Donnell bid them farewell and went back home. And before he left, he gave them some ideas of what to expect in the future. For instance, he said poltergeists often like to tear up photos, for example. So O'Donnell goes home. Marie and Vic are leaving, but just as they turn to lock up the house, they hear a crash from inside. They open the door, switch on the lights, and laying on the floor of the lounge were 2 small oil paintings. Both lying face down with the glass shattered. One of them was a wedding photo of Jean and Joe Pritchard, and the painting had been slashed from one end to the other, almost like it had been done with a knife. It was almost like the entity overheard O'Donnell.
Yes.
And got a little inspiration.
And said, wait a minute, that's actually a really good idea.
It's a dope idea. It's a dope idea, O'Donnell.
Do you mind if I pop off with it? O'Donnell said.
Do you mind if I use that?
How crazy is it that there is just this man that happens to live in the neighborhood and knows all of this stuff, even in 1966?
Yes. And remember this whole thing about him suggesting the tearing of the photos and then the poltergeist doing it? Keep that in mind, because at the end of the episode, we're going to take stock of some things, and it's really cool. The author of one of these sources really painted a cool picture about, it's a theory essentially, but pretty fascinating.
Cool.
So Sarah and Philip returned home the next day, and both Friday and Saturday were mostly quiet. And it was Saturday when Jean, Joe, and Diane returned from their vacation in Devon. Philip and Sarah, they explained everything that had happened, and they explained the strange knocking noises as well. And right as Joe asked what kind of knocking noises, there suddenly came 3 loud knocks.
This thing has good timing.
Yes.
It's like Chris Rock.
All the windows of the house rattled, and a gust of cold wind whipped through the house. Everyone paused. After a few moments, the noises stopped and the temperature went back to normal. Whatever it was almost like the entity was bidding them farewell for a while, because it would be 2 years until the activity would pick back up.
Wow, 2 years.
Which is kind of interesting about this story.
That is very strange.
And the theory is 2 years, so what was it, Philip's 15, Diane's 12. The theory is that, by the time it comes back, Philip's graduated from high school, Diane's 14. Maybe it's a separate poltergeist.
Right.
Maybe it's now based around Diane.
Diane Moore, right.
Or maybe it's the same one, but yet it could no longer feed off Philip.
Right,
and
right,
return
right.
With, you know, these are theories.
Like
but
their
interesting.
house, like the location of their house itself was like very fertile ground for this
Exactly.
kind of thing. And then just whenever there was someone in there. But it's interesting that it just happened for one night or whatever with
Right,
Philip.
for like a weekend with Philip.
Right, or for a weekend, right.
And as we know, these typically
Interesting.
happen around young girls. Not that they don't; they do happen with young boys. But I think it's
It's
not
usually girls, but it's just interesting that it happened first with a boy in this case. Because in some sources I've read or listened to, they don't really say much about Philip, and then in some sources they'll say how Philip was very much an angsty teen, kind of could be a little bit of an ass to his parents or whatever.
Right.
No judgment. That's what teens are gonna do. But maybe that's why, like, the poltergeist activity really was intense for a weekend, because he was kind of being an ass about not going on this trip.
Exactly.
I don't know.
So 2 years go by. Philip has now graduated from school, out of high school, and he's gone to work at his father's pet shop in town.
That's cool.
They owned a pet shop. I thought that was pretty cool. Diane was now 14, and Grandma Sarah was now 72 years old. Sarah she spent most of the weekends with the Pritchards. Guess they just loved Grandma,
Nice.
and Grandma would
Yeah,
come visit.
come on, Grandma.
They had mostly forgotten about everything that had happened 2 years ago, but something had reminded Sarah about it. And then Sarah would kind of bring it up like, wow, you guys remember that crazy thing 2 years ago? And everyone was just kind of like, who knows what it was. Everyone was just kind of, they didn't really care about it like Sarah did. Probably because they didn't see it firsthand
Exactly.
like Sarah did.
Yes. And I think people also, it's just easier to say like, yeah, that was weird, I don't know, kind of brushing it off, rather than really thinking about it and trying to come up with some sort of explanation.
At this time, Jean was redecorating Diane's room. And one afternoon, she took a break to make some tea. Jean and Sarah, they were sitting in the kitchen having tea. And finally, Sarah, it was clear this question had been like weighing down on her. Sarah finally said that she kept hearing strange noises. Jean said she hadn't noticed anything, and they lived there all the time.
Right. But maybe that's why she could hear it.
Exactly. Because she's not used to it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if it's not in your face, like banging, maybe you can write it. Because think about it, we live in an apartment in Chicago. How many fucking noises do we hear?
I mean, especially our apartment, it's literally insane. Our kitchen sink might be a full poltergeist situation.
Yeah. Well, just then there was a sound. And Sarah was like, well, did you hear that? And Jean was like, no. But Jean stepped out into the hallway and she stopped in her tracks.
Uh-oh.
There in the hallway, lying at the foot of the stairs, was a counterpane from Jean and Joe's bed. It wasn't there just minutes before. Jean picked it up. She takes it upstairs and puts it on her bed. And she returns to Diane's room to get back to decorating. A few moments later, there comes another noise, a very loud crash. Jean steps out of the room into the hall and looks down the stairs. Now the counterpane from Philip's bed was at the bottom of the stairs.
What the fuck?
And on top of that, all of the plant pots had been upended and there was soil everywhere.
Ugh, that sucks.
Shocked, Jean slowly made her way down the stairs and walked to the kitchen, where Sarah was crying.
Sarah, no.
And looking up at Jean, she told her, I told you, it's starting again.
Wow. Grandma knows.
Grandma knew it.
They always do.
Grandma
They
knew
just do. I don't know how.
Listen to Grandma, friends. Cut to later that night.
Yeah.
Grandma Sarah has gone home. Everyone in the house is in bed asleep except for Jean. She was restless. The place was kind of warm and she couldn't sleep. So she just got out of bed and went to Diane's room to maybe just do a little few things. She moved some of the painting and some of the painting materials out of her room. And just as she was tidying up, that's when Jean noticed how quiet the house was.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, it's night. Everyone's asleep, but this was too quiet.
It was the absence of sound.
Yeah, it was an eerie quiet. And that's when she felt a cold chill in the air. It was about to happen again. The house was dark except for a little dim light coming in from an outside street lamp, but it was just enough light that Jean could see something moving in the corner. She flipped on the light, and just as she did, something zipped past her face. She turned to see what it was. It was a paintbrush.
What?
A paintbrush had been thrown at her.
Okay.
Next, a paste bucket went zipping by, slamming the opposite wall, splashing paste everywhere.
Okay, that's worse. We don't like that.
With the lights on, she could now see what was moving. A roll of wallpaper had been left up against the wall from earlier, but now it was standing on end, swaying like a snake. Jean could plainly see no one was holding it or making it do that. So she summed up the courage and reached out for it, but just as she did, it just fell limp on the floor. And just then, the sweeper lifted off the ground, I'm guessing vacuum.
Oh.
And it began to swing in the air as if the entity was using it as a club.
Oh, God.
Jean is so terrified, she can't even scream. The source says she kind of fell on all fours and just crawled out of the room because she couldn't even run.
Oh, she's just like so utterly and fully terrified.
Right. She fell on her all fours and just kind of crawled out of the room. And the thing didn't hit her, but it's just swinging in the air. She's like,
wow.
And she crawls down the hallway back to her bedroom. And right as she closes the door, she sees that one of the rolls of wallpaper were following her. Just like following her like a child almost. Like it was rolling like a snake following her. She closed the door, sitting with her back against the door. She screams. So finally she gets back to her bedroom.
And she can
screams.
finally scream. Oh my God. The fact that it followed her, it's like so creepy and weird. It like
playing.
Yeah, it clearly is like, it's like playing a game with you.
Right.
Oh God, I hate that.
She screams. Joe launches out of bed, wondering what the hell's going on. Moments later, Philip and Diane, they'd come to the room as well. Paintbrushes and materials were now floating everywhere. A paintbrush flew right by Diane's head, barely missing her. But then another flew and struck her straight in the shoulder.
Oof.
Joe grabbed up his daughter. But what was weird was, other than frightened, she was fine. This is something we're going to see a lot in this story. For example, this brush, it looked like it was thrown with considerable force. It's even not going to seriously hurt you. It's going to sting like hell or something.
Right.
A lot of times this would happen throughout the story, but it's like when it would actually hit you, it was just
a tap.
It was like it was scary. So it's like it's throwing a thing at full force, but when it actually hits you, it doesn't.
And that's more of a classic poltergeist situation where it's scary and annoying, but it doesn't really cause any serious harm.
Exactly.
And that is what was kind of different about the Bridgeport poltergeist.
Right. Absolutely.
Which was, even though no one got like seriously hurt in there, like people really did bleed and like, all that stuff. So that was very unusual.
Right.
Whereas this is straight up OG poltergeist activity.
Exactly. The entity then seemed to move into Diane's room. Obviously, they can't see anything. It was just like the energy that felt like it had moved to Diane's room. And they watched as the wooden pelmet that hung over the bedroom window was ripped from the wall, taking the 2-inch screws with it, much like Bridgeport.
Yeah.
And it flew out the window, and they could hear it strike the ground below. Joe quickly shut the door to Diane's room, as if that would contain it. But obviously, I would probably do the same thing.
Right.
That night, Diane slept in her parents' room with the door locked. Like we said, they knew that if this was supernatural, that's not going to help much, but it was just like a peace of mind.
Yeah, it just makes you feel a little better, at least.
Well, as the months went on, the Pritchards were able to sort of tell that the entity seemed to almost have like a specific identity. It seemed to have its own likes and dislikes. The whole family had now come to call the entity Mr. Nobody.
Oh, okay.
And specifically, Jean would refer to it as Fred.
Oh, okay.
So they're getting, even though they still get freaked out, they're getting comfortable enough with it.
Right.
And while the activity, like I said, never stopped startling them and being nerve-wracking, they were sort of able to fall into a weird routine with it.
Interesting. I kind of get that.
For example, they learned that the activity rarely happened during the day. The source says this might be because Diane was at school during the day.
True.
It would usually start up around bedtime with loud bangs followed by items floating around. Then inevitably, the lights would go out. And when they would check the main switch in the cupboard, the switch would be flipped off. I'm guessing like their circuit breaker.
Right, yeah.
A few times, Jean even taped the switch in the on position. 30 minutes later, the lights would go out. And when she checked the switch, it would be turned off and the tape would be vanished completely.
Weird. Oh, and the tape was just gone. That kind of stuff, when it's real physical things appearing and disappearing, is when it kind of makes my blood feel weird. Like,
cool.
like it's like, oh God,
there's some
what's
other
going on?
Weird how they manipulate physical stuff. There's more coming, and it's so cool.
But it does make sense that this would be when the activity would start happening. Not only because that's when Diane was home,
exactly,
but because that's the the worst time for it to happen. That's the most annoying time for it to happen, when you're trying to go to sleep so that you can be ready for your next day. So it's just trying to cause the most annoyance and disturbance it can. And that's also the scariest time of day. You can't see as well, blah, blah, blah.
So it was actually Philip who first mentioned the idea of exorcism. And Vic, who lived next door, thought that was a pretty good idea. So he reached out to a local vicar named Reverend Davy. So Reverend Davy agreed to come over that week. He would visit that Thursday at 7 p.m. So he comes over to the Pritchards, and Jean had tea and sandwiches ready. They sat and chatted, and they filled Reverend Davy in on everything that was going on. And here's the interesting thing about poltergeist that I had forgotten before. Exorcisms are meant for demons or just ghosts of former people. Doing an exorcism for a poltergeist seems to almost always make things worse, because if we go by the theory, poltergeists are manifestations of the living. They aren't going to go anywhere.
They don't really, this is where they are. They are always here.
Well, they sit there, they chat for 90 minutes, hour and a half. Nothing happens. So after a while, Reverend Davy decided it was time to head home. And the Pritchards, they felt horrible bringing him all the way out there for nothing to happen. But then there came a loud thumping sound from above them.
Uh-oh.
And then a brass candlestick flung off of the mantelpiece onto the floor. Now, Reverend Davy didn't see it levitate. He just saw it fall to the floor. And he had an idea. He suggested to them that it might be subsidence, which subsidence, I had to look up that word. It's when the ground beneath a place is slowly sinking, like a sinkhole.
Oh, okay.
And, it obviously items can fall and whatnot.
Yeah.
Well, just as Jean began to speak to say, no, that's not what it was, the other brass candlestick lifted off the mantle and floated right in front of Reverend Davy's face.
Wow, taunting.
Before the Reverend could say anything, there came a loud crash in the lounge. They hurried over and found that every cup, saucer, and plate from the cupboard were now scattered all over the floor of the lounge. But here's the thing. Not a single one was broken.
I was just going to say, I bet none are broken, though. Yep.
So Reverend Davy was now a true believer, and he told the Pritchards that he thought something evil might be in the house, and he warned them that the spirit might become violent.
Oh.
Well, just after Reverend Davies left the Pritchards' home, a very strange thing happened. Diane was on her way up the stairs to go to bed when suddenly the lights went out.
Diane
froze right where she stood, because she could see a little bit because, like I said, outside was a street lamp, so there was a dim light. And that's when Diane noticed a large shadow appear on the wall.
Fuck.
Simultaneously, the air became icy cold. She watched in horror as the hall stand, which is a very heavy piece of furniture, and an electric sewing machine both lifted up off the floor and came toward her.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's bad.
Diane tripped, stepping backwards, and fell with her back to the stairs. So she's like halfway up the stairs. The hall stand and the sewing machine pressed down on her, pinning her to the stairs.
What?
She tried to push back, but it wouldn't budge. She was so scared she couldn't even scream. Just then, the lights come back on, and Diane now screamed for help. The family, of course, was there in a flash. Both Jean and Joe, obviously, and Philip, they're horrified. They think their daughter's getting crushed.
Mm-hmm.
Jean, Joe, and Philip, they're trying to pull these objects off of her. But here's something unique. These items were very heavy and could easily have crushed Diane. Diane, though she was scared, was physically fine. It seemed as though the entity was just using enough force to pin her down.
Wow.
But not hurt her.
So it has control, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Jean was noticing, because Diane's whimpering and sort of crying, Jean, she could feel a force that was resisting them from lifting this object off of her. And Jean told Diane, honey, just try to breathe, relax. And as she did, Diane could feel the force loosen. And she said, try now. And Jean and Joe were able to remove everything and put it back to where it was. So once again, it's just enough force to hold you down and pin you, but it's not trying to crush you.
Right.
But it could. Like,
It's showing you it
was
could,
heavy.
but
Right.
there's purposely not allowing it. And same thing too with that there was a force keeping them from pulling it off of her too. That's another kind of like clear show
Right.
of control, but then it also not only just it's showing that it has control, it is very amazing that
Right.
it is able to control the amount of pressure on something. Like in lots of other cases, you kind of just hear about a spirit or a ghost or an entity or whatever just throwing things.
Exactly.
Like they have the ability to begin the like inertia,
Right.
but they can't follow through. They can't control
Exactly.
the object. So this is different.
Right.
And I think maybe that shows that it since it's connected to a human, it can be more deliberate with what it's
Yeah.
doing. Maybe I don't know.
It's a good point. Well, after they had settled down enough, Jean helped Diane get ready for bed. And not long after Diane was alone in her room and the lights out, she felt that chill in the air again.
Oh no.
Suddenly, the bedding ripped itself off the bed and went into the corner.
Oh God, that's so fucking scary.
And Diane could just sense there was someone in the room with her,
No shit, Diane.
but she couldn't see anyone. The light was on in the hallway, so she could see somewhat, but there was nobody there. Suddenly, her mattress shot out from underneath her, tossing her to the floor. And then the mattress would then lay on top of her.
What?
Not hurt her, but it was just then like flopped
That's just
down on
like
top
so
of her.
weird.
And it would do that 4 times that night. Which, first of all, how after the first time are you not fucking crawled in between your mom and dad?
Yeah.
What do you mean 4 more times? I would after the first. I would be.
You put your mattress back on your bed and you sleep?
So let's talk about this poltergeist is displaying some interesting stuff, like the chalky dust, the green foam in the water, and how it would act like it was destroying a bunch of things, but then everything would be fine. Mm-hmm. Also, we usually associate bad smells with entities.
Yes.
But apparently, before Mr. Nobody, or whoever this entity was, would become active, people would notice a very nice floral scent.
Really?
And sometimes these banging noises now were getting so loud they could be heard from a few streets away.
Oh my God, that's crazy. That's interesting about the floral smell because I've heard mainly that a floral smell is usually a good thing. It's like
Right.
angelic, and that roses, like if the smell of roses means you're in the spirit of Christ,
Yeah.
maybe, or
Like
Mary, or
Mary,
the Virgin
right.
Mary.
Because didn't we, in Annalise, wasn't that the smell of roses or something?
That's right. But overall, floral smells are usually attached to
The divine.
the divine, or the benevolent, or at least chill.
Right.
At the very least, trill.
So in September of 1968, 2 reporters would come to the Pritchard's house to cover the story. One from the Yorkshire Evening Post, and the other from the Pontefract and Castleford Express. And in these articles, they mentioned seeing stuff as well. In fact, one of them noticed the family's grandmother clock, and they commented that it was fortunate that the entity hadn't destroyed it. Minutes later, the grandmother clock was in bits after somehow being pushed to the floor.
Oh, wow. So that one did break.
Yes, this is one of the few things that did break.
Okay.
They apparently also witnessed Diane being tossed from her bed numerous times.
Yeah, I mean, with the damn mattress.
And they also noted that when Philip would try to record audio of the noise, they actually saw with their own eyes the plugs getting pulled out of the wall.
Whoa. Oh.
So, by now, the haunting at the Pritchard's house had become a bit of a local sensation. Amateur ghost hunters were constantly asking to stay the night. They once were outside and they heard a bus driver, because there was a bus stop nearby, they heard the bus driver announce to his passengers, "That's the haunted house." Like it was a stop on a tour.
Right. And I like that that was also just like a city bus.
Exactly.
That wasn't a tour bus, but he still was acting like a tour guide.
A group of students from Leeds asked if they could camp in the family's front garden, to which Jean declined. But regardless, when the weather was nice, people would sleep out on a patch of grass that was in front of the house. I'm guessing it wasn't on their property.
It was like technically not their property.
Right.
Oh, that's so fucking annoying.
Right. Well, around this time, Jean bumped into an acquaintance of hers named Renee Holden, who was Vic Kelly's sister. Jean remembered that Renee was, quote, a bit psychic. At least that's what the source says. I'm guessing she just had a knack for these sorts of things.
Yeah, she was, in tune with these,
Yeah.
with this side.
Well, she told Renee about everything her family was dealing with, and Renee was intrigued and accepted Jean's invitation to visit the house. So the next day, Renee goes to 30 East Drive. The first thing Jean shows her is upstairs. 3 of the upstairs bedrooms were total chaos. It literally looked like someone had burglarized them.
Oh, God.
And Jean explained that she had tidied up only 30 minutes ago before Renee arrived.
What a pain in the dick.
The source says that Jean and Renee just clicked. They became kind of instant friends.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, that evening while Renee was there, she stayed all night. Nothing happened.
Oh.
But regardless, Renee believed that Jean was telling the truth.
We love Renee. Yes to Renee.
And Jean asked her if she would want to stay again the following night, which was Saturday night, and Renee happily agreed. And Jean was just so thrilled to have someone to talk to, so this must have felt great.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like we said, Renee didn't see anything that first night, but she would be witness to almost everything that would come in the months afterward. And the show started when she returned to 30 East Drive that Saturday night.
Okay.
Grandma Sarah was also staying at the Pritchards that weekend, so it was a full house. Sarah was actually kept in her room most of the time because she wasn't feeling well. Joe, at this time on Saturday evening when she was there, Joe was out at a nearby pub just having a drink with friends. Renee arrives, and Jean was happy to have her there. She was in the middle of making chicken sandwiches and tea, so Renee helped her finish that. They chatted as they worked, when all of a sudden, the lights go out.
Oh, no.
And Jane right away says, "It's starting," to which Renee says, "I know, I can feel it." After a moment, the lights suddenly came back on. And Jean said that was actually kind of weird because usually it would make them turn the lights on themselves. So nothing seemed to be happening. There wasn't any noise or anything, so they shrugged it off and they put the tea and sandwiches on a tray and carried them to the lounge where the kids were watching TV. And they're getting all settled in and about to eat when the lights go out again. The room then became icy cold, and a gust of air seemed to sweep through the house. Objects began to levitate and float around the room. And on top of that, they all noticed a sort of rhythmic tapping coming from the window, almost like someone was tapping to be let in. Once they were able to get the lights on, the room was obviously a mess. Cushions and ornaments scattered about. The sandwich plate hadn't moved, though, but all of the sandwiches were gone.
Come on.
They looked around at first, couldn't find anything, but then Jean found a few of them behind the television set.
What?
And when she picked them up, she gasped. Renee's like, "What? What is it?" Jean held out the sandwiches, saying, "Something's eaten it." And sure enough, a huge bite had been taken out of one of the sandwiches, and whoever it was had big teeth.
That's so weird.
Yeah, very frightening.
What?
Very
I mean,
frightening.
how does that... I don't... What? Come on.
So in the coming months, like we said, Renee would be witness to a lot of these weird things. But during these moments of activity, Renee was very vigilant, and she would take notes of things that would happen. The children, for example, would both report stomach aches before an event. And Diane would describe it as sort of feeling twisted inside, like something was twisting you. Renee, this is the theory, but Renee believed that the poltergeist might have been drawing energy from the solar plexus of the kids, which is a chakra.
Yeah, a big one. A big daddy one.
It might also be drawing energy from the underground stream that ran beneath the house.
Right.
So Renee suggested they should try to make contact with whatever was in the house. The family agreed. So they all stood in the hallway, hand in hand. They just concentrated on sort of asking the entity to reveal itself. Not out loud, just kind of thought about it. Suddenly there was a loud sound of rushing wind. And from upstairs, over the landing, suddenly every bit of furniture from the second floor began to shower down. Probably one of the best stories come out of the Black Monk haunting. Happened on a snowy winter's evening. Joe Pritchard's sister was coming to 30 East Drive to visit the family. Her name was Maud Pierce, and she was definitely what you'd call a curmudgeon.
Oh, I could tell by her name, if I'm being honest.
She was visiting the family to get a first-hand look at what was going on. You see, Maud was a skeptic, and she found it quite shameful that the family would be associated with this sort of tabloid bullshit. She was convinced that it was the kids making Jean and Joe look like idiots.
Maud, get out of here. This is wild.
But Maud was about to get a front row seat to the supernatural.
Yeah.
You see, they're all sitting in the kitchen when suddenly the room went icy cold. And then out went the lights. The light from the kitchen fire gave off enough light that everyone could kind of see what was happening. Maud herself watched as the fridge door opened and a jug of milk floated out across the room. It floated over to where they were and stopped right above Maud's head.
Yes.
Then the jug turned and emptied out the whole jug of milk onto Maud's head.
Yes. This is dope.
Maud jumped to her feet, shrieking. After a moment, Jean was able to turn the lights back on. Maud just pointed at Philip and Diane, saying, "It's the kids!"
Oh my God, Maud.
Jean was like, "No, they were by me the whole time." But Maud refused to believe it.
Maud.
She said if it was a ghost, it could do it with the lights on. She believed that because the lights went out, it was because someone didn't want to get seen.
Maud, I've had enough with her today.
Well, Jean told her to spend the night. She could see for herself, and Maud accepted. Maud, after she agreed to stay, she's looking around. She couldn't find one of her gloves. She had these nice fur gloves. Jean told her not to worry, that the entity would often hide things and then they'd always turn up. They all moved into the lounge and were getting settled when the lights went out again. Suddenly, the loud banging started.
There we go.
Maud shouted scoldingly, and as she did, the lights went back on. Only now all the chairs had been flipped upside down. And likewise, the electric fire from the electric fireplace had been pulled out.
Whoa.
Everything that was in the fridge in the kitchen moments ago was now laid out on the lounge floor. The kids just burst into laughter.
Yes.
Maud was pissed off. She was still convinced they were trying to pull one over on her.
Maud, I swear to God, I'm just gonna snap with Maud today. I cannot.
Well, the rest of that night, up until bedtime, was pretty quiet. But later that night, Jane, Diane, and Maud, they slept in Philip's room. Philip slept in Diane's room, and Joe just slept in his and Jean's bed. So Jane, Diane, and Maud are all in one room. Jean was just climbing into the bed when the reading lamp levitated off the bedside table and floated out into the hallway.
Hell yeah.
And a few moments later, they saw these lights pop up from around the corner of the door. And they realized they were the little electric lights from the electric fireplace. And they watched as they danced around the frame of the door until two were at the top, two were at the bottom. But then they saw hands. Jean, Diane, and Maud were frozen in fear. A giant hand emerged from the top of the door, and another giant hand emerged at the bottom at about 6 inches from the floor. Whatever this thing was, it had one hell of a wingspan. And that's when they all realized whoever or whatever it was wearing Maud's fur gloves.
Oh my God.
Maud shouted, "Get away! You're evil!" And she threw one of her boots at it.
Okay, kind of pop off, Maud. Okay.
And when she did, the gloves disappeared. After a few moments, they appeared again in the doorway. One of them seemed to be signaling them to come closer, like you do with your finger, you know?
Oh my God.
All of them stood right where they were, and after a moment, one of the gloves formed a fist and shook threateningly in Maud's direction.
Oh my God.
Well, Maud busted into a rendition of Onward Christian Soldiers.
Oh, hell.
To combat this thing.
Maud, pop off. You know what? I'm changing my tune. This bitch is brave.
And instead of getting upset, the gloves began to wave in rhythm to the song as if they were conducting a choir.
Oh, damn, they're doing a jam!
After a moment, the gloves vanished once again, and Ma said, "You have the devil in this house."
Wow, that is fucking crazy.
No one would get much sleep that night, obviously, and Maud the next morning would say she wouldn't stay in that house again even if they paid her 20,000 pounds. Funny enough, Maud's gloves were nowhere to be found, which Maud didn't mind at all. But sometime later, Jean actually found the gloves, folded up in the cupboard. She took them back to Maud to return them, and Maud wouldn't touch them. She carried them into the garden with a pair of coal tongs and burned them.
Wow.
So this next part I found very fascinating, and I can't wait to discuss it.
Okay.
Not long after this, the poltergeist began to display abilities that the source says are very rare for poltergeist cases. But the source refers to it as the interpenetration of matter. So what the heck does that mean? Because I certainly didn't know.
Yeah, I don't get it.
But the book gives examples, kind of what we were talking about earlier. One day, the family was hanging out in the lounge when an egg floated through the door. They all watched as it floated in the air a moment before dropping to the floor, and when the egg hit the floor and broke, the room was filled with a sweet floral scent. A moment later, another egg floated into the room. Well, damn it, Jean was not going to go out and buy another carton of eggs.
Yeah, come on.
So she rushes to the kitchen, takes the eggs from the fridge, and puts them in a wooden box. She closes the lid and sits on it. Suddenly, an egg appears right in front of her face and explodes.
Oh my God.
Once again with that sweet floral scent. So Jean hopped off the box, opened up the lid, and one of the eggs was gone. She closed it again and sat on it. Moments later, another egg appeared and did the same thing. Somehow this entity was able to dematerialize the egg and then rematerialize it outside the box. Is this interdimensional travel? Like, what is this?
Yeah, like how does that happen? Or maybe it can be invisible or something, and can go through objects. I don't know.
So now you remember Vic Kelly, he was the one who first reached out to that vicar to have him have a look at the house.
Right.
Well, he himself, Vic, was actually Catholic, and he wondered if a full-blown Catholic exorcism was what was needed.
Yeah, they needed the OG shit.
Yeah. So he reached out to his own priest, Father Hudson, and Hudson explained to him, hey, exorcism is not a cure-all. These were very difficult things that sometimes made the situation worse. And plus, he would have to get approval from higher up, and they would almost certainly decline it. But Hudson said there were other things that could work. Perhaps just praying a simple blessing in the house while sprinkling holy water might take care of it. And this is something the family could actually do on their own. Mm-hmm. So Vic acquired a bottle of holy water, and he went to the Pritchards. And Jean was a little hesitant because she was afraid it would make things worse, but she felt bad that Vic had gone through all this trouble, so she was like, why not? So Vic went through the house, sprinkling the water and reciting prayers, and it was pretty uneventful. Once he wrapped up, Vic and Jean were chatting when suddenly there came a loud crash above them, and they saw as water began to trickle down the wall in streams, seeming almost like it was mocking the holy water he had spread. The entity wouldn't let up for the rest of the night, making noises, tossing Diane out of bed, ripping blankets off of people, and it went on till 5 a.m.
Wow.
Well, everyone was exhausted the next day. Diane could barely stay awake, so she stayed home from school, and it wasn't long until it picked up again.
Oh no.
Diane was combing her hair in the mirror by the fireplace when Jean noticed a drawer from a nearby table slowly pulling itself out. And before she could say anything, it rocketed toward Diane, hitting her in the back.
Oh, God.
And once again, while it looked like it would have hurt, Diane barely felt attacked.
Weird.
But this is where things get really dark. Above the mantelpiece was a brass crucifix with a depiction of Christ on it. It suddenly zipped off the wall and flew directly to Diane's lower back and stuck to her. It wasn't hurting her, but it was almost as if Diane was like made of metal and the cross was like a magnet.
What the fuck?
Diane's frantically trying to get this thing off of her, shouting for help. She could see in the mirror it was the cross. So she ran out into the hallway. She almost felt like she was being wrestled around. She runs out into the hallway, and when she gets out into the hallway, there was another noise. She turned to see that a portrait of Jesus that hung in the hallway had fallen to the floor.
Yikes.
And at the other end of the hall hung another cross, which suddenly fell to the ground.
What?
Suddenly, whatever was holding the cross up to Denise's back released, and the cross just fell to the floor. Jean lifted up Diane's shirt, and on her back, between her shoulder blades, was a sort of red mark in the shape of a cross. But after a few days, it went away.
That is so weird.
Well, after Vic blessed the house with the holy water and prayer, the entity seemed to take on a dislike for Christian iconography.
Right.
For example, Easter morning, Jean woke up and was walking downstairs smelling that floral smell, and she discovered downstairs on various walls in the lounge and around the house, upside down crosses had been painted on the walls.
Oh, God.
And these images were done with excellent precision, almost like they were done with a stencil and spray paint.
Wow.
Now, there had been a can of gold spray paint at the house that was being kept in the outhouse. Philip was intending to use it to paint his bike. Jean tried to recreate the image with the spray paint, but the paint wouldn't dry the same way the ones on the walls did. So this freaked Jean out, so she reached out to the local vicar, who came along with another clergyman, and they observed the crosses, and they told Jean to keep them there until after Easter, and that they promised they would return right after the holiday.
Oh, God, so they just have to keep these upside down crosses in their house?
And they never returned.
The vicars didn't come back? Oh my God.
Yeah. One weird example of how this entity could manipulate matter, kind of like with those eggs. For example, Renee had this white mohair coat that went missing one day. They later found it in the coal shed, buried under coal.
What?
And when they pulled the coat out, it was completely clean.
That's insane.
Likewise, a family friend named Alan had stopped by for a quick visit one evening, and when he left and was walking back to his car, the windshield wipers were going back and forth as if someone had turned them on, but the car was off and he had the key.
Right. What?
He had the car looked at, and of course nothing was wrong with it. And then on top of this, that same night, as Alan got in his car and looked back at the house, it seemed to almost be glowing.
Oh.
And another neighbor on that same night would actually report the same thing, looking out the window and seeing 30 East Drive, it almost appeared to be glowing.
Wow.
Once Jean was cleaning the kitchen fireplace, when all of a sudden, from down the fireplace came a shower of keys.
What?
These were the keys from all the various doors and locks throughout the house. There was 19 in all. What was weird, though, was there was an extra key, a very old-looking key,
Oh, no.
to which Jean was never able to find what it belonged to, but she kept it with her.
Oh, that's so weird.
Interesting.
And that's because you often hear, maybe not necessarily so much in like true cases like this, but in stories and everything, that there's a room that has a lock. People are looking for the key.
Right.
And I think this is just interesting where there's a key, but they can't find where the lock is.
Exactly.
Maybe that's where this entity
Right.
is. You just got to find the lock. I don't know.
That's a good point. Now, all this crazy stuff is about to hit peak scary.
Oh, shoot.
The entity had begun to reveal itself to the family. Jean and Joe were in bed one night when the door swung open, and standing in the doorway stood a tall figure that wore a dark cloak and hood. When they flipped the lights on, it vanished.
Oh my God.
And in case I didn't mention this before, it's a semi-detached home. There's this other residence where the Mountain family lives.
Right.
Mrs. Mountain said that one time she was standing at her sink in the kitchen when suddenly she felt someone standing behind her. When she turned around, standing there was a tall figure in a black monk's habit with a black cowl that covered its face. Oddly enough, Mrs. Mountain said she didn't feel fear, only curiosity.
Wow.
She said it looked solid. It didn't look like see-through or anything. It looked
Right.
solid. And after a moment, it just vanished. Likewise, Renee would see the monk as well. During one incident after a social event, they went back to the Pritchards afterward for a drink, and of course the lights go out. And Renee felt something in her hair, almost like a bunch of ants.
Oh my God.
From
No.
behind the curtain, she saw an arm, cloaked in black, raise up. And all of a sudden, when the lights went on, it was gone. And obviously there was no ants on Renee.
Oh, fuck. This is, oh my God.
Quick side note, around this time, the entity, it says, had also started making very realistic impressions of farm animals, which if you remember, Jeff, the poltergeist of Dobby,
Yeah.
would do that.
Yes. Weird. What the fuck?
It finally reached a climax one night when suddenly the lights went out, and as Jean was searching for the flashlight, she heard Diane scream. It was dusk, so there was just enough light to sort of see around. Diane had been dragged up the stairs and was on the top landing. She was there screaming, and in the front of her, her cardigan was stretched out in front of her as if invisible hands were pulling it.
What?
Jean and Philip ran upstairs and grabbed hold of Diane and tried pulling the opposite way. Suddenly, the entity let go. Jean, Philip, and Diane all tumbled backwards down the stairs.
Oh, God.
Thank God no one got hurt.
Jeez.
And when a friend of Joe's returned from Scotland, he explained that the folks up there would often hang garlic around the house to dispel spirits.
Huh.
Now, Joe had obviously heard about garlic for vampires, but
Right.
not for things like this, but nevertheless, they tried it.
And that it works for a swang as well. We
That's
found
right.
out a few weeks back.
And believe it or not, the activity stopped.
Really? Just with garlic. Just that.
So let's skip ahead 10 years.
Oh, okay. A little bit of a fast forward.
A young guy living in the area named Tom Cuniff, he was always fascinated by the story of the Black Monk, and he wondered if it might somehow be related to the local priory that stood there from 1090 to 1593.
Oh,
He visited
okay.
the family, and when he did, Jean told him about a discovery she'd made at the local library. A book mentioned that a monk at the monastery there in Pontefract, who lived during the time of Henry VIII, this monk was apparently evil, having raped and murdered a young girl.
Oh, yikes.
And he was hung for that crime at the very gallows where the Pritchard's house stood.
Oh.
Now, the author of the source says he did research and found that while the monk in question did have a history of violence, there was no mention of him raping and killing anyone, nor about him being hanged.
Oh.
The only monk or priest they could find of someone being hung was a vicar named George Beaumont, who apparently was accused of carrying correspondence for the enemy during the Civil War. So different. But the author makes this interesting point. When Mr. O'Donnell said that the poltergeist liked to tear up pictures, that same night, the picture was torn.
Right.
When the two journalists commented on the grandmother clock, it was destroyed shortly after.
Right.
Is it possible that when the family learned of this black monk story, it therefore informed the entity and it knew how to act? So maybe it just took that story and became that, just as like it had a reference point.
Yes, like it can't really, either it has a reference point, it hears what they think and they do it.
Right.
Or
and if it's coming from the children, maybe they hear that and they think, oh, and obviously they don't realize they're doing it, but once that idea's in there.
Right. Well, I think it also, it maybe shows that the entity, it can't know something that you don't know.
Yeah.
It can only know the things that you know because it is human made, basically, or human born, kind of. But it is also interesting, too, where it makes you think, could it be two things going on?
Exactly.
Like we said. Like maybe the poltergeist activity was one thing, and then maybe there really was some nasty monk doing something. Exactly. Or maybe it's not even a bad monk. Maybe it's just, like we said, there was, I don't know if it was a seminary or a monastery or whatever it was, but there was something there.
Right.
So maybe there are ghosts, negative, positive, or neutral, popping around there. I don't know. But that is so frightening.
Very scary.
The when you talked about the hands, when you could see the hands on the door, at the top and the bottom of the door, that is truly, truly eerie.
And now you can see, like I said, this is kind of like the happy version of Bridgeport Poltergeist.
Yeah.
The story didn't end with them being like shamed in the press.
Right.
No, it was like, that was like Bridgeport Poltergeist was super depressing.
I know.
This one's kind of funny. Like Maud getting her shit handed. Like there's
I mean, it was
that are
like
kind of funny.
I mean, it was like Harry Potter.
Yeah,
it was like when Vernon's sister comes into town and then Harry/Dobby dumps a cake on her head.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really reminded me of that. And it's interesting too that it was like it happened in kind of bursts. It just ended very abruptly, and it's funny too that it was such a simple thing, like just garlic. It was like, oh, okay, I guess that was all we had to do that whole time.
Right.
Was just cook a goddamn bolognese.
Exactly.
For Christ's sakes. But Dylan, what an amazing episode. Damn, thank you for doing that in-depth, cool, snazzy research.
Well, thank you very much. And of course, if you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/Creep Street Podcast.
That's right. And you can also like, rate, subscribe, share us on social media, tell a friend about us. All of those little things really add up and help the show. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Victoria Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Citizens of the Milky Way, good night.
And
goodbye.
Bye now.